Here's off the top of the developing story overnight on SportsCenter. Lane Kiffin is expected to head to LSU. That according to Mark Schlabach and Pete Thamel, who cite sources who did say the contract hadn't been signed as of late last night, but said it would be a shock if he didn't sign the 7-year deal worth roughly $12 million annually. Sources telling ESPN's Marty Smith Kiffin will hold a 10 a.m. Eastern time meeting with Ole Miss players today, followed by an announcement about his future. That is how we start SportsCenter AM. Gary Streisky, Randy Scott, Heather Dinich, Paul Finebaum joining us bright and early this morning. Paul, you're up first. What's your reaction now to this Lane Kiffin news overnight?
Well, it concludes one of the greatest odysseys we've ever seen in college football coaching, with him talking about going to at least 3 different schools: Ole Miss, LSU, and Florida. This is the one that most people coalesced around in the final days. But what took so long is the question, Randy. And most people believe that Kiffin meeting with the chancellor yesterday and the AD was lobbying to either coach in the SEC championship game, which would have happened had Auburn beaten Alabama, and ultimately the playoffs, which will happen a couple weeks later. They apparently did not want him to do that. He tried to lobby them to have the team decide. They apparently chose not to do that as well.
So he is reportedly going to go to Baton Rouge and course correct a 7-5 LSU team. Meanwhile, Heather, he's still currently the head coach of a 10-1 Ole Miss team. They just won the Egg Bowl. They are a CFP contender. What does this mean for Ole Miss?
Well, you're right. They are a CFP contender, and I expect them to stay that way. But if Ole Miss has an interim head coach heading into the playoff, that gives the selection committee the liberty to consider that when doing their final ranking on selection day. The selection committee protocol says that the committee can consider the availability of key players and coaches and how that might impact the team's postseason. They're certainly not going to drop Ole Miss out of the college football playoff, but if they don't think they're as good of a team with an interim head coach on the sideline, they can consider dropping them a spot or 2. Most likely, I would say they still host a first-round home game.
Oh. All right, 7th ranked in the college football playoff rankings, these Ole Miss Rebels. We're going to keep you updated on this story throughout the morning here on SportsCenter. Thank you to Paul. Thank you to Heather.
That is how Rivalry Week comes to an end. Those are the sights and sounds of the final game in the regular season. Heather and Paul back with us on SportsCenter. Let's start in the SEC, where Alabama will take on Georgia for the conference championship game. Heather, how will Alabama's performance in the title game affect their seeding in the playoff?
This could be really tricky for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, because if Alabama loses and finishes as a 3-loss runner-up, how far do they fall after having beaten the SEC champs during the regular season? They would have lost to Georgia, a team that they beat. This could be last year's Alabama, where they finish as the committee's highest 3-loss team, but are out of the playoff to make room for other conference champions. And if they win, how high can they climb because they lost to Oklahoma? Could the SEC champs be stuck behind the Sooners on Selection Day? Kalen DeBoer might want to wear that black hoodie on Selection Day.
Yeah, he may want to do more than that, Heather, because if Alabama loses this game and gets left out, it will truly be one of the greatest travesties in modern college football history. It will make these college championship games, the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, really irrelevant. I mean, they are bordering on irrelevancy as it is, but the idea of earning your way into one of these things and then losing to a team that you beat on their home field would just literally blow the entire system up. So I think a lot of people are watching this very closely. It will be one of the most interesting moments in CFP history if they lose.
All right, through to the ACC. Virginia takes on Duke in the popped collar ACC championship game. Heather, what does this potentially mean for the ACC in the playoff picture?
It could mean that the ACC is excluded from the college football playoff and James Madison is in. This would be the absolute nightmare scenario for the ACC and the selection committee, because what they would consider is JMU's strength of schedule, which is 118th in the country. This is why you haven't seen JMU in the CFP top 25 yet. Duke has a slightly better strength of schedule. They're around 74. James Madison, though, their strength of record is 18th in the country, far better than Duke at 59th. So the selection committee and the ACC would both have a much easier time if Virginia runs away with the ACC championship.
And I'm sure some people are wondering, like, what happened to Miami? Because Miami is the best team in the ACC, and they're going to be nowhere near Charlotte on Saturday night, which is really incredible. But it's just the system that we have. And going back to what we were talking about a moment ago, these conference championships in many ways are on life support. And while the SEC point is a good one, this one even brings it home more coherently, because how you leave your best team home from a conference championship, I'll never know. But we are about to watch it with the ACC.
It is interesting that Miami is the only ACC team right now in the CFP Top 12, their latest edition of, yet still has just a 9% chance to make the playoff, according to that All-State playoff predictor. Heather, Paul, thanks so much. Alabama, Paul, will beat Georgia for the second time this year, this time in the SEC Championship. Paul in or Paul out?
I'm in, and I once picked Georgia against Alabama, and a friend of mine said, don't ever pick Georgia against Alabama. And guys, you know it, the record is pretty supportive of Alabama winning. I think it's 9 out of the last 10. Now, some will say, yeah, but weren't most of those with Nick Saban? One of those losses was with Nick Saban, but do I need to remind you that Kalen DeBoer is 2-0 against Kirby Smart? Nobody's 2-0 against Kirby Smart.
All right, how about this? Speaking of coaches, if Lane Kiffin, Paul, becomes LSU's head coach, as he is expected to do today, he will have these Tigers competing for a national title next season. Paul in or Paul out?
I am in, because that's why this whole thing happened. That's why everybody coveted Lane Kiffin. He is that good of an offensive coach. He attracts players. He's the king of the portal. And you saw what he did with Ole Miss this year. Well, you're seeing what he's doing with Ole Miss. I think he can do the exact same thing in Baton Rouge, where a lot of coaches, except Brian Kelly, 3 in a row, have had won national championships. Lane Kiffin will win a national championship in Baton Rouge.
Holy smokes. Ole Miss right now going to the CFP. LSU trying to bounce back next season from a 7-5 record. Paul Finebaum, a little Paul in, Paul out this morning on SportsCenter. Thanks, Paul. Rivalry week delivering yet again. Now we are graced with Roman Harper joining the program this morning. Rome, good morning. Fantastic to see you. Now that Rivalry week is done and behind us, what stood out to you most over the weekend?
Gary, Randy, man, good morning, guys. I'll be honest with you. What stood out to me was the SEC and its rivalry week living up to the standard. And what does that mean? It means really good football and a big side of some spicy drama. All right, Vanderbilt went out there on the road, had a big win against Neyland Stadium versus Tennessee, locking in 10 wins for their first time ever in their program history. You had the Egg Bowl, somebody's jersey got stolen, and the coach may leave this morning. We don't know about that one. The Iron Bowl right there, all the drama that is the Iron Bowl every year, especially in Jordan-Hare. Texas was Texas A&M's older brother once again on Friday night, so that game kind of played out. LSU versus Oklahoma. I don't even know what to call that game, but the last 3 or 4 minutes were crazy. And, you know, it just keeps going down the line and down the line. It was awesome this weekend. Shout out to everybody. Even Florida getting back up off their deathbed and knocking out Florida State in a game nobody watched. So it was really fun as the SEC. They all stood out. They all were great to me. And it was just a fantastic day of football and a whole bunch of just drama.
I like how Rome's not pulling punches. He's like, that game happened. There. Nobody saw it.
Out there slinging it. Hey, Rome, I do want to point out that we are all ears, severed and otherwise, for this next question. It's time for Roman's Forum. And Rome, the floor is yours.
All right, fellas, I got to do that this morning, man. Here we go. I think I almost broke my crown. Here we go. The Vanderbilt Commodores. The forum belongs to you. Diego Pavia, Clark Lee, the guy that deserves so much credit for building this program out I've been talking about it. The Vanderbilt Commodores have been my passion project for the last 3 years. I've been telling everybody how much I've seen this team improve. And it's finally all come together with a 10-win season for the first time in that program's history. Clark Lee, you deserve so much credit for bringing in Diego Pavia, bringing in Tim Beck and that whole offense and believing in them, because they did something by knocking off Tennessee, who is a rivalry for you. But Tennessee doesn't look at you as a rivalry because you're just Vanderbilt to them. Sure. And all of a sudden you go out there and you beat them by 21 points. Big statement win. And he signs an extension before the game to let everybody know where he stands, and that is Clark Lee. And it is with the Vanderbilt Commodores, unlike some other coaches that are all signing extensions right now. But yes, Vanderbilt Commodores, you deserve it because this has been your greatest season in program history. And Diego Pavia, you deserve to be at the Heisman for the first person ever in Vanderbilt's history for that one as well. So shout out to Vanderbilt. You are my forum this morning.
Rome's in a good mood after Bama takes down Auburn.
You darn right I am.
He's in a good mood.
You darn right I am.
All-State playoff predictor giving Vanderbilt a 5% chance to make the playoff, but they're already number one in Roman Harper's heart. Thank you, Rome.
What new information do you have this morning?
Well, Jay, there will be no shocks today. Lane Kiffin is headed to LSU to become that school's next head coach. Things could be formalized within the hour. Obviously, there's a team meeting coming up in Oxford, Mississippi, within the next hour. And I've been told by sources this morning to expect things to proceed quickly from there in terms of the formalization of Lane Kiffin as LSU's next coach. Things quickly shift to what happens to Ole Miss, which is a college football playoff team. Part of the tension that has been the undercurrent of this entire Kiffin saga was the preference of Ole Miss officials to not have Kiffin coach in the CFP. That is believed to be the case. That was the case of late last night. Unless something unforeseen changes, Lane Kiffin is going to go to LSU. Who he takes with him immediately will be of much interest. And then Ole Miss has to chart a course of how they're going to navigate the college football playoff without their head coach.
All right, Paul, to you, what's your reaction to all this?
It's very predictable because it is Lane Kiffin, and just when you thought everything was perfect with him, Jay, it changed because he was in demand and he simply could not resist the temptation to go to a school that has done so well, winning national championships under 3 straight coaches. The reason they fired Brian Kelly and paid him $54 million, he could not get it done in 4 years. But the real interesting part yesterday was being played out live on television all day while friends of Kiffin, people like Nick Saban and others were lobbying heavily to ask Ole Miss officials to allow him to coach. Obviously, we don't think they wanted any part of that, and that really was the dilemma, including the fact that Auburn had tied Alabama last night. Had they won the game, and then Ole Miss would have been going to Atlanta for the SEC game, which may have paused things just slightly.
All right, Paul, Pete, thank you so much. Again, the players meeting at 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll see what happens. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
You want this, you got that.